Wow, fantastic playing.
Thank you,
Great. Welcome to onlinelessons.tv, everybody who tuned in. Thanks for tuning in. And we have a very special guest tonight. We couldn't be more happy and excited about this. He's probably one of the most sought after session drummers in UK and Europe, and even worldwide. He's worked with major artists like Robbie Williams, Adele, Seal, Trevor Horn. You've recently worked with Bryan Adams and many others. It's incredible. The list is amazing. Before we get right into that, as always, our users can sign up to join the chat, and you can type in questions, which we will forward directly to Ash. So, welcome, Ash Soan. Great to have you here.
Thank you.
And before we discuss any details of the grooves or fill-ins you just played or you ever played, let's start with, how did you get into drumming? When did you start? Very briefly.
Yeah.
And what's your personal background for that? And maybe shed some light on who were your drum heroes when you started, and did they change over time?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, like most people, I was ignited by the drums very early on. I was 10 when I started playing, and also, like a lot of my peers, I wasn't doing particularly great at school, and the drums just sort of did something to me, and I focused more than I've ever done on anything else. And my parents, I'm a parent now myself. My parents identified that this thing was kind of special to me, and they kind of nurtured it. They bought me a drum kit about a year later. I got a drum kit when I was 11.
Okay.
And it kind of just snowballed from that. It was something that I properly focused on, and I still do. And it's a gift.
And you did study drums?
Do my kids?
No, did you study drums?
Yeah,
like
I did.
Yeah, you went to London very young?
Yeah, I mean, I got lessons pretty early on, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, my parents made sure that I got proper lessons, and I studied, kind of almost immediately I got a proper teacher.
Okay.
Yeah, and on the one hand, it's been really good. Sometimes I feel, with all the creative arts and things, sometimes it's great to let people just find their way, you know, sometimes. But I'm sort of glad that my early stages, I properly showed how to hold the sticks and the rudiments and a little bit of reading and things from the beginning. Yeah.
So who was your drum hero when you started drumming? What music were you into? Maybe
when I started, I mean, so when I was a teenager, it was the 80s, the middle of the 1980s. So I guess Stuart Copeland would have been quite a big one for me. There's a lot of synthetic drum beats going on in the 80s, as there is now. But it was the decade where drummers got nervous because the drum machine came around. They wanted drummers to play to clicks and guys couldn't and things. It was a funny time. So I guess Stuart was in a fantastic band, the Police at the time, and I really dug that, dug his energy. Manu Katché was an early one, true, and Jeff Porcaro, of course, and then I got via Jeff, and I got into Gad and all those guys. Omar Hakim was a big one too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's incredible.
Yes.
Okay. So you studied these groove grades, and how did you manage to maintain your own voice or find your own voice? I mean, that's probably the thing that every musician strives for.
Yeah.
And how do you not become a copy of your idol?
Yeah, well, as we talked about, over lunch, sorry, all you guys missed it, but we were talking about the early influences, and Vinny, of course, Vinny Colaiuta was, I really tried to be Vinny, like a lot of people are still trying to do. And I think sometimes Vinny tries to be Vinny, sometimes. But,
probably, yes.
I really tried to do it, but there was a moment. This is in my sort of very late teens, early 20s, when I realised I'm never going to be him.
No matter how hard you practice singing stroke roll.
Whatever I did, and I was practicing pretty hard, like people do, and working pretty hard, and I realised this just isn't going to happen. Same with Omar. I got really into Omar, and I still adore both of them.
So what was your strategy to deal with that? You changed your idol, or you changed your practice schedule, or?
Yeah. When I really started to find my proper voice, I mean, I've always been attracted to songs above everything, even though obviously now I'm playing some of this kind of music, which is more sort of drum-friendly, kind of fusion, crossover music. That's because it's fun to play. Everyone loves playing it. But all along I've been attracted to songs and song players. And the most important song players for me are people like Gad and Bacaro, where they would play the song, but they would also add a little bit of magic somewhere.
Absolutely.
Just catch your ear and you go, that is unreal. I mean, there's very little landscape for that nowadays, but it still does happen. You know, you can still play and put a feel in sometimes and it makes it onto a recording.
Well, it seems to become more popular again now recently, and that's a great trend. Well, I personally prefer that the music world is shifting towards that direction.
Yes.
And we'll have some other questions going in a similar direction further down. So what you just mentioned is adding that magic to a song. We were chatting about playing to a click, and like every drummer nowadays has to be click proof. They have to be able to work with a click. That's a requirement, but that does not automatically make you sound great or make great music. But maybe the feeling aspect is much more important. And we also talked about this earlier, that like till the early 70s, there wasn't necessarily a click track when great music was recorded. Many of the Aretha Franklin stuff with Purdy on the drums was recorded without a click.
That's right. And so what the bands would, firstly, the bands would all play together to cut those records. And they would play and play and play and play until it feels, this is feeling amazing. And then they'd start recording it. And they'd probably do a few takes and figure out which is the best one. But they weren't, you know, I'm pretty sure back in the 60s and 70s, they weren't thinking about metronomic time. It wasn't thought of like it is now.
It wasn't even important if the track didn't end in the same tempo it started. No one cared.
That's okay. In fact, you know, if you talk, obviously some of those musicians are still around, and if you talk to them, what matters, and still what matters, is the spirit of the song and the feeling of the track. And if it happens to speed up by 3 BPM, let's not kill ourselves. You know, it's like, it's fine.
Okay, you know? But what would you suggest to drummers that are working on improving their timing? Yeah. If becoming faster is suddenly allowed or wanted, if it serves the spirit of the song? Yeah. How do you train that? Do you have any suggestions, or how did you train that? I mean,
yeah. Well, I mean, I'm lucky enough to come from that era where clicks weren't that important. But it started to come in, so I learned how to play to a click quite early on. Now I don't really listen to them, and it's never. It's funny. I did a take on a record for someone, and I played, and it wasn't. It will never be you know. There's not many people that can play completely to the grid. Vinny's probably one of them. I'm pretty sure Bacaro was another.
Probably, yeah.
But to play completely on the grid, and I played this take, and everyone was happy with the take. I was happy with the take, and somebody in the room said, "Oh, well, let's quantize it to the grid," and they did that, and it didn't feel. And I mean, we're only talking about, you know, you're talking about a few milliseconds on the bass drum here and there and stuff like that.
And it felt wrong, or?
And it didn't feel right at all. Okay. So everyone was pretty much...
And everybody was, it was in unison that everybody said...
It was very apparent. It was like, oh, well, that's perfectly in time now with the track, but it felt better
Something's missing.
You know?
And it's the groove.
But it's just that little bit where you're going into a chorus and you as a human will move ever so slightly. And, you know, Omar said something years and years ago, which always stays with me about the click in particular. Someone asked him this in the late 80s. I remember watching a TV show. Yeah. And someone asked the same question to him, and he said, the thing about the click is you've got to be comfortable enough with it that it's there, but what he found was fun is that you can play around the click. And he actually said it. He actually said the way he described it was dance with the click and have fun with the click. Here comes the chorus, so you can just ride the crest of the wave, as it were, in front of the click, and when it comes back to the verse, maybe there'll be a couple of moments where you're properly behind. Going into a line of a song, you might go bop, and you're completely, you know, as far as the grid's concerned, you're completely off. But if you listen to the song and maybe where the lyric drops or where the bass slides or something, it's beautiful.
So that's what musicians mean when they say you can play with the click.
Yeah.
Miles said the same thing. He said you can play in front of the click, you can play behind the click, and you can play on the click.
And I mean, obviously, you need to have a level of skill to be able to play with it, to be able to do that.
It mustn't be by accident.
That's right. You can't ignore it. But I think sometimes, you know, if you get comfortable enough playing, that's the time. You know, this is what the time feels like. Then, I mean, honestly, I think it's fine. And the most important thing about recording is that they can make you in time. They can make you in time. They can import a loop that's perfectly in time. They can make one bit of your performance in time. They can do anything they want. What they can't do is do that exciting thing that drummers do when they're going into a chorus.
So to learn that, would you recommend to young drummers or drummers working on the timing to play with the groove grades and get a certain track and play that over and over again for a month or for weeks?
Yeah, I mean, I've said it before. Like, if you played to Rosanna every single day for a month, you definitely your halftime shuffle would get better. There's no question.
I would
about
not become Porcaro or you, but it would improve. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, without question. You know, and also, you know, it would eventually rub off that kind of feling that Jeff's got.
Allow to adapt
with that pocket.
Okay.
You know, because you're subconsciously taking it in every single day. You know, and I think it might have been Billy Ward. There's a great drummer in America that said, "We are everything that we have heard."
Yeah.
And I thought
it gets digested.
Brilliant. It's a brilliant statement because they're kind of right. Like, if you're, you know, there's parts of me that are really into Copeland. Can I demonstrate something? So, you know, I remember, and I've been very fortunate enough to meet Stuart.
He lent you a snare drum, right?
I played his snare drum, yeah. And he played on a gig. We were both on a gig together for Trevor Horn. But I remember we were talking, and I heard Zenyatta Mondata record, and there's a crazy hi-hat thing. Like this, but there was a delay, and when I was so young, I didn't realise it's a delay.
There was a delay. Okay.
I thought he was playing it, and it sounded like this. That's what it sounded like to me. That whole.
Okay.
But he was actually playing.
So you practiced the wrong thing, or
I practiced the wrong thing? But you know, his influence. What I'm saying is, I listened to it lots and lots and lots to try and get it.
The spirit takes over,
and eventually a little bit of Stuart, hopefully, is in my playing. You know, I hope so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So talking about musicianship, I mean, you've worked with many great artists, and what I'd be interested to learn is when you go to the studio with a major artist like Adele. You played on one of the tracks on the 21 album called Set Fire to the Rain.
Yeah.
And when you produce on that scale, there's a pre-production, and there's a lot of work going into pre-production. So how detailed was the drum track which you got, and what was the producer expecting from you to provide to the track?
Yeah. Well, the producer, a guy called Fraser T. Smith. And it was unusual, that session, mostly because Adele was at the session.
You don't get to meet a lot of the singers you work with.
I also didn't know who it was for. I mean, a lot of the
time.
Really? Yeah. A lot of the time, producers will say, "What are you doing on a Thursday evening? I've got a session." Cool, and you go down there, and you don't know until you sit down in front of the speakers, and it's like, "Oh, it's that person." And that's on that occasion, that was the same.
Why is that?
Well, a lot of the time they don't want to send any music across the internet just in case it goes astray. Like if you'd sent me...
Yeah, with good reason.
Yeah. I mean, I won't do anything, obviously, do anything with it. But you just never know. Yeah. Just sending emails of Adele demos across the internet. You just never know what's going to happen. So you never get really to hear it. And on that occasion, Fraser had a rough idea of kind of what he wanted. Not fully the part.
So the style and the tempo is all defined,
yeah,
but not orchestration.
Not full orchestration, and also like sections. We did quite a few overdubs on that. I did like a hi-hat and snare pass, a bass drum and tom pass. I think we did some cymbal, swells. There's quite a lot of stuff going on with that. There's also a snare roll pattern in the second verse, and Adele came up with that. She said to me, I hear this like sort of military thing,
marching stuff.
Yeah, marching thing in the second verse. I was like, okay, cool. And she sort of sang some ideas to me, and I went into the drum room, and I could see her through the glass, and they rolled the track back to me, and I was playing with
She looked happy.
a few little patterns, and then when I caught this little loop, that I made a kind of loop up with what I was doing. I looked through the glass, and she was there going, "That's it, that's it." And if you listen to that, it's great, you know.
Job done.
Yeah.
So all these ideas came from you. You gave your input, Adele gave her input, and the producer had his word.
Yeah.
And, okay.
Yeah, and sometimes, I mean, my favourite sessions are when they don't know what they absolutely got no clue. That's really exciting, because then you can properly give your creative input.
Sounds a bit stressful, but it's exciting.
I like it. When it's great when a room full of creative people go, well, what do you think?
Yeah, if you call the right people,
you know,
you can't go wrong.
Yeah, so. It can be really exciting.
And that's an amazing record to be on, because you share that record with two other drummers, which are awesome. It's Chris Dave, which I totally didn't expect, and I didn't know until I started researching for this interview that Chris Dave was playing on that Adele record.
That's
and
right.
It's Leo Taylor,
Pino,
who's Pino Palladino's on the record as well.
That's right.
I didn't know that either.
Yes.
So yeah, and Leo Taylor is not very known in Germany, I think, but
he's not very known in England. He keeps himself very, very, very quiet.
He's not present in social media, and not at all, because he probably doesn't like it. He happens to be the son of John Taylor and Norma Winston, who in Germany are major names, because John Taylor used to teach at the Jazz University in Cologne. So many people from the jazz scene know who John Taylor is.
Yeah.
And when I saw his photo, it was obvious, like, okay, Taylor, it must be, there's a connection.
Yeah. I mean, I've not knowingly met him, really. I think I must have met him somewhere along the line. But he keeps himself. He's very different to me. I'm all over social media. It's sort of.
But he's really busy. I mean,
he's very busy too.
I looked what he did, and he's done a lot of records.
Yeah.
So the example with the drum roll is another great example of the phrase "serving the song."
Yeah.
And that's a phrase like many drummers like to claim this for themselves, because it displays that you are in charge of your ego and you are able to keep your ego out of the way.
Yeah.
But not many drummers actually manage to do it. If you go to sessions or whatever, if you see the drummers and they just play over the top or besides the band or whatever can happen. So that's really a mastery not many manage to achieve, and you've obviously done it. And so how did you learn not to get in your own way and really provide just the thing that the song needs?